Let's get back to the pandemic now and talk about the effect of the lockdown and the whole threat of the coronavirus on young people. There's a kids helpline and they've noticed a significant increase in the number of people calling for help for their kids. Let's bring in child psychologist Clare Rowe. Good to talk to you again, Clare. You've talked all along about some of these pressures on kids. Worrying to see evidence now. You see it every day in your practice, of course, but seeing broader evidence about increasing mental health concerns with young people.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think it will be an increasing issue. I mean, I've been quite honest in saying that I think the majority of children have actually handled the pandemic very well up until this point. I think myself as an adult, like many other adults, are coming to the realisation now that this isn't going away anytime soon. So that uncertainty will certainly start resonating now with our children. And I think there's different issues at different ages. I think the uncertainty and the unknown of what's happening, I mean, that's a concern for us adults. Is this a 2020 thing or is this a 2021, 2022 thing? So the uncertainty of the unknown is certainly going to start taking its effect. And I know I've spoken to you, Chris, about, the novelty factor wearing off. And that's, there was a novelty factor at the start. School was cancelled, and I was seeing that with kids. They weren't that concerned. I am starting to see now a shift, in the way our kids are coping.
Yeah, and look, in Sydney and most of the country, really, it's pretty easy these days for kids in terms of what they can do. They're back at school. Sure, they're missing out on some excursions. School sport's been disrupted and weekend sport. But apart from that and the message on hygiene and the rest of it, perhaps having mum and dad working from home, kids' lives are back to something close to normal. But how much more dire must it be for children in Victoria, where they've been through lockdown once, they're now in a more severe lockdown, only can leave the house for an hour a day, a curfew overnight? It must be quite burdensome.
Oh, yeah, it's massively different. I mean, as you said, people in other states and certainly in Sydney, I mean, they are minimally affected. I would put the people in kind of, Brisbane, Sydney into a couple of groups that are suffering, those who are vulnerable in the past, i.e. they had some anxiety conditions about general health and things, and those kids obviously are not coping. And also, I saw a couple of Year 12s today. They're not feeling that great because they're in Sydney, but they're not having their formals, not having their graduations, and they are important to a 17-year-old finishing school. But look, the kids in Melbourne, if we have a prolonged period like this, it will affect mental health. I'm getting calls from Melbourne about kids presently who are really struggling and are exhibiting some very disturbing behaviours. Of course, if anyone is feeling a bit down and a bit isolated and suffering some anxiety or depressive symptoms, what do? We encourage them to get outside. We encourage them to maintain routine, maintain structure, maintain mental stimulation. These are the things that have been taken away.
Yes, so that's the problem.
It's like a mass experiment on steroids for a psychologist, isn't it? In the worst possible kind. I mean, you take a whole generation of kids and lock them up and see what happens. It's very scary.
It's a worry. Thanks for joining us again, Claire. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.
Clare Rowe there. Got to be careful, these kids. Not too much panicking and alarmism, a little bit more optimism and hope, and get out and about when you can, as Claire said.